The story of Audre Lorde. Lorde was born in New York City to Caribbean immigrants. Her father from Barbados and her mother from the island of Carriacou. Lorde's mother was of mixed ancestry but could pass for Spanish, which was a source of pride for her family. Lorde's father was darker than the Belmar family liked, and they only allowed the couple to marry because of Byron Lorde's charm, ambition, and persistence. Nearsighted to the point of being legally blind, and the youngest of three daughters, Lorde grew up hearing her mother's stories about the West Indies. At the age of 4, she learned to talk while she learned to read, and her mother taught her to write at around the same time. Born as Audre Lorde, she chose to drop the Y from her name while still a child, explaining a new spelling of my name that she was more interested in the artistic symmetry of the E endings in the two side-by-side names. Audre Lorde, then in the spelling her name the way her parents had intended. Lorde's relationship with her parents was difficult from a young age. She spent very little time with her father and mother, who were both busy maintaining their real estate business in the tumultuous economy after the Great Depression. When she did see them, they were often cold or emotionally distant. In particular, Lorde's relationship with her mother, who was deeply suspicious of people with darker skin than hers and the outside world in general, was characterized by tough love and strict adherence to family rules. As a child, Lorde struggled with communication and came to appreciate the power of poetry as a form of expression. She also memorized a great deal of poetry and would use it to communicate, to the extent that if asked how she was feeling, Audre would reply by reciting a poem. Around the age of 12, she began writing her own poetry and connecting with others at her school who were considered outcasts, as she felt she was. She attended Hunter College High School, a secondary school for intellectual gifted students, and graduated in 1951. While attending Hunter, Lorde published her first poem in 17 magazine after her school's literary journal rejected it for being inappropriate. Also in high school, Lorde participated in poetry workshops sponsored by the Harlem Writers Guild, but noted that she always felt like somewhat of an outcast from the guild. She felt she was not accepted because she was both crazy and queer. In 1954, she spent a pivotal year as a student at the National University of Mexico, a period she described as a time of affirmation and renewal. During this time, she confirmed her identity on personal and artistic levels as both a lesbian and a poet. On her return to New York, Lorde attended Hunter College and graduated in the class of 1959. While there, she worked as a librarian, continued writing, and became an active participant in the gay culture of Greenwich Village. She furthered her education at Columbia University, earning a master's degree in library science in 1961. From 1972 to 1987, Lorde resided on Staten Island. During that time, in addition to writing and teaching, she co-founded Kitchen Table, Women of Color Press. In 1977, Lorde became an associate of the Women's Institute for Freedom of the Press. WIFP is an American non-profit publishing organization. The organization works to increase communication between women and connect the public with forms of women-based media. In 1981, Lorde was among the founders of the Women's Coalition of St. Croix, an organization dedicated to assisting women who have survived sexual abuse and intimate partner violence. In the late 1980s, she also helped establish Sisterhood in Support of Sisters in South Africa to benefit Black women who were affected by apartheid and other forms of injustice. In 1984, Lorde started a visiting professorship in West Berlin at the Free University of Berlin. During her time in Germany, Lorde became an influential part of then Afro-German movement. Together with a group of Black women activists in Berlin, Audre Lorde coined the term Afro-German in 1984 and consequently gave rise to the Black movement in Germany. In Sister Outsider Essays and Speeches in 1984, Lorde asserts the necessity of communicating the experience of marginalized groups to make their struggles visible in a repressive society. She emphasizes the need for different groups of people, particularly white women and African American women, to find common ground in their lived experience, but also to face difference directly and use it as a source of strength rather than alienation. She repeatedly emphasizes the need for community in the struggle to build a better world, how to constructively channel the anger and rage incited by oppression is another prominent theme throughout her works, and in this collection in particular. Lorde also discusses the importance of speaking, even when afraid because of one's silence will not protect them from being marginalized and oppressed. Many people fear to speak the truth because of the real risks of retaliation. The Lorde warns, your silence does not protect you. Lorde emphasizes that the transformation of silence into language and action is a self-revelation, and that always seems fraught with danger. People are afraid of others' reactions for speaking, but mostly for demanding visibility, which is essential to live, Lorde adds. We can sit in our corners, mute forever, while our sisters and ourselves are wasted, while our children are distorted and destroyed, while our earth is poisoned. We can sit in our safe corners mute as bottles, and we will still be no less afraid. People are taught to respect their fear of speaking more than silence, but ultimately, the silence will choke us anyway, so we might as well speak the truth. Lorde writes that we can learn to speak even when we are afraid. Lorde identified issues of race, class, age, ageism, sex, and sexuality. Later in her life, chronic illness and disability, the latter becoming more prominent in her life later years as she lived with cancer. She wrote of all these factors as fundamental to her experience of being a woman. She argued that although differences in gender have received all the focus, it is essential that these other differences are also recognized and addressed. Throughout Lorde's career, she included the ideal of collective identity in many of her poems and books. She did not just identify with one category, but she wanted to celebrate all parts of herself equally. She was known to describe herself as Black, lesbian, feminist, poet, mother, etc. In 1962, Lorde married attorney Edwin Rollins, who was a white, gay man. She and Rollins divorced in 1970 after having 2 children. During her time in Mississippi in 1968, she met Francis Clayton a white lesbian and professor of philosophy who was to be her romantic partner until 1989. Their relationship continued for the remainder of Lorde's life. From 1977 to 1978, Lorde had a brief affair with the sculptor and painter Mildred Thompson. The two met in Nigeria in 1977 at the Second World Black and African Festival of Arts and Culture. Their affair ran its course during the time that Thompson lived in Washington, D.C. Lorde and her life partner, Black feminist Dr. Gloria Joseph, resided together on Joseph's native land of St. Croix. Together they founded several organizations. Lorde was first diagnosed with breast cancer in 1978 and underwent a mastectomy. 6 years later, she found out her breast cancer had materialized in her liver. From 1991 until her death, she was the New York State Poet Laureate. When designating her as such, then Governor Mario Cuomo said of Lorde, "Her imagination is charged by a sharp sense of racial injustice and cruelty, of sexual prejudice. She cries out against it as the voice of indigenous humanity. Audre Lorde is the voice of the eloquent outsider who speaks in a language that can reach and touch people everywhere." Lorde died of breast cancer at the age of 58 on November 17, 1992 in St. Croix.